The Greek gods weren't benevolent protectors watching over humanity with gentle wisdom. They were volatile, petty, and genuinely terrifying forces that treated human beings like disposable playthings. And the more you examine the actual myths, the clearer it becomes that ancient Greeks didn't worship these beings out of love. They worshipped them out of pure, rational fear. Consider what Zeus did to Prometheus, not for murder, not for theft of gold or jewels, but for giving humanity fire. For that single act of compassion toward mortals, Zeus chained Prometheus to a rock and sent an eagle to tear out his liver every single day. And because Prometheus was immortal, the liver regenerated each night, ensuring the torture would continue forever. No trial, no proportional punishment, just eternal agony for helping humans survive. That's not justice. That's sadism with unlimited power. But here's what makes it worse. Zeus was considered the most rational of the Olympians. He was the king, the lawgiver, the one who supposedly maintained cosmic order. If that's rational, imagine what the others were capable of. Take Hera. Modern retellings often portray her as a jealous wife, almost sympathetically, as if her anger was justified by Zeus's constant infidelity. But the myths tell a different story. Hera didn't just punish Zeus. She couldn't. He was too powerful. So instead, she targeted the women he seduced and the children they bore. Women who often had no choice in the matter, who were coerced or tricked by a god they couldn't refuse. When Zeus disguised himself as Alcmene's husband and slept with her, producing Heracles, Hera spent decades trying to destroy the child. She sent serpents to kill him in his cradle. When that failed, she drove him mad, causing him to murder his own wife and children. And even after Heracles completed 12 impossible labours as penance, labours that should have earned anyone redemption, Hera still wasn't satisfied. She tormented him until his death. This wasn't a woman scorned. This was a deity with infinite power and infinite cruelty, punishing victims for crimes they didn't commit. The pattern repeats endlessly. Athena, goddess of wisdom, supposedly the voice of reason among the Olympians. A mortal woman named Arachne claimed she could weave better than Athena. Maybe arrogant, maybe foolish, but hardly a crime worthy of divine intervention. Athena challenged her to a contest. Arachne won. Her tapestry was objectively superior, and for being better at weaving, Athena transformed her into a spider. Cursed to weave forever, her humanity stripped away for the sin of excellence. There's no moral lesson there, no justice, just a god who couldn't tolerate a mortal being superior at anything. Or consider Apollo, god of music, poetry, and prophecy. Marsyas, a satyr, challenged him to a musical contest. The muses judged it a tie. Apollo, unsatisfied with anything less than total victory, declared he would play his instrument upside down and demanded Marsyas do the same. Marsyas played the flute. You can't play a flute upside down. Apollo played the lyre. You can. Apollo won on a technicality, and his prize, his chosen reward for this manufactured victory, was to flay Marsyas alive, to literally peel the skin from his body while he screamed, for losing a music contest. These aren't isolated incidents. They're not exceptions or exaggerations added by later storytellers. This is the consistent pattern of divine behaviour throughout Greek mythology. The gods demand worship, demand sacrifice, demand absolute submission, and they respond to the slightest perceived disrespect with disproportionate, often eternal punishment. Tantalus served his own son as a meal to test whether the gods would notice. Horrific, yes. His punishment: standing in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree, eternally hungry and thirsty. But whenever he reached for fruit, the branches lifted away. Whenever he bent to drink, the water receded. Forever. Not for 1,000 years, not for an age, forever. Sisyphus tried to cheat death. His punishment? Pushing a boulder up a hill for eternity, watching it roll back down just before reaching the top, then starting again. Forever. The gods didn't just punish crimes. They punished ambition, pride, curiosity, anything that suggested mortals might be more than terrified subjects. And the truly disturbing part? The Greeks knew this. They wrote these stories, passed them down through generations, taught them to their children, and continued worshipping these beings anyway, not because they loved them, because they understood something we've forgotten. Power doesn't require goodness. Divinity doesn't imply morality. The gods were forces of nature given consciousness and cruelty. You don't worship a hurricane because it's good. You acknowledge it because it can destroy you. You perform rituals, make offerings, build temples, not out of devotion but out of desperate hope that maybe, if you're careful enough, reverent enough, submissive enough, you might be spared when divine attention turns your direction, because the alternative was being noticed for the wrong reasons. And when the gods noticed you for the wrong reasons, mercy wasn't an option they considered. The architecture of Greek temples reflects this reality. They weren't built as community centres or places of contemplation. They were built as houses for divine statues, physical anchors to keep the gods present and appeased. The rituals weren't expressions of love, they were transactions. Blood sacrifices, burnt offerings, elaborate ceremonies designed to satisfy beings who could obliterate cities on a whim. But there's something even darker beneath all of this. Something the myths reveal when you look past the surface stories about jealousy and pride and punishment. The gods weren't just cruel, they were territorial, obsessively, violently territorial about something specific: knowledge. Look at what happens every single time a mortal gets too close to divine understanding. Prometheus didn't just steal fire. Fire was technology, yes, but the myth explicitly states he stole the knowledge of how to use it, how to master it, how to build civilization with it. And for that transfer of knowledge, Zeus chained him to a rock and sent an eagle to eat his liver every day for eternity, letting it regenerate each night so the torture could continue forever. That's not punishment for theft. That's punishment for education, for daring to elevate mortals beyond their designated place. But it goes deeper than Prometheus. The entire structure of Greek mythology is built around this same principle. Mortals who gain too much knowledge, who see too much, who understand too much, they don't just get punished, they get erased. Actaeon, a skilled hunter, accidentally witnessed Artemis bathing. He saw the goddess in her natural form, unguarded, unmasked. She transformed him into a stag and had his own hunting dogs tear him apart. Not because he intended offence, because he saw what mortals weren't supposed to see. Tiresias, the blind prophet, was blinded specifically because he saw too much. Different versions give different details, but the core remains consistent. He witnessed something divine, something forbidden, and his sight was taken. Though interestingly, he was compensated with prophetic vision. The gods took his ability to see the present, but gave him the ability to see the future, almost as if they needed him blind to the physical world before they could trust him with deeper knowledge. Why? What were they protecting? The standard interpretation says they were maintaining cosmic order, preserving the hierarchy between divine and mortal. But that explanation falls apart under scrutiny because the hierarchy wasn't just about power. Gods had physical power. They could throw lightning, cause earthquakes, sink ships with a thought. They didn't need to guard that jealously. Everyone already knew they were more powerful. What they guarded was understanding. The mechanisms behind their power, the knowledge of how things actually worked. Consider the oracle at Delphi, one of the most important religious sites in ancient Greece. The Pythia, the priestess who delivered prophecies, would enter a trance state and speak words she didn't understand. She was a conduit, deliberately kept ignorant of what she was channeling. The priest would then interpret her utterances for the people seeking guidance. 2 layers of separation between the divine message and human understanding. The Pythia couldn't know what she was saying. The people couldn't hear it directly. Only the priestly class, the intermediaries, had access to both sides. That's not a system designed for communication. That's a system designed for control through managed ignorance. And it wasn't unique to Delphi. Mystery religions throughout Greece operated on the same principle. Initiates underwent elaborate rituals, took oaths of secrecy, and were gradually exposed to hidden knowledge but always with the understanding that revealing it to outsiders meant death. The Eleusinian mysteries promised initiates some form of blessed afterlife, but we still don't know what was actually revealed in those ceremonies because for over 1,000 years, the secrecy held. People kept the knowledge hidden even under threat of execution, even as Christianity replaced the old religion, even as the temples were destroyed. Whatever they learned, they considered it worth dying to protect. Not their own lives, the secrecy itself. That level of sustained silence across centuries doesn't happen naturally. It requires something profound enough to make secrecy feel more important than survival. But here's what really disturbs me. The gods themselves had hierarchies of knowledge. Zeus knew things the other Olympians didn't. The Olympians knew things the Titans didn't. The Titans knew things mortals couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just divine versus mortal, it was layers within layers. Each level kept deliberately ignorant of what the level above understood. The Moirai, the Fates, knew things even Zeus couldn't access. They wove destiny itself, and not even the king of gods could alter their work. He had to ask them, plead with them, negotiate with them, because they operated on a level of knowledge he didn't possess. So when mortals tried to access knowledge above their station, they weren't just challenging the gods, they were threatening to collapse a carefully maintained structure of compartmentalized understanding, a structure that required each level to remain ignorant of what existed above it. And the punishments for breaking that structure weren't just cruel, they were specifically designed to prevent knowledge transfer. Prometheus chained where he could see humanity, but never reached them again. Marsyas flayed as a warning to anyone who might achieve divine-level skill. Tantalus, surrounded by sustenance he could never consume, forever reminded of what he couldn't have. These weren't random tortures, they were object lessons, living demonstrations of what happens when you reach beyond your designated level of understanding. The question we should be asking isn't why the gods were cruel, it's what were they protecting? What knowledge was so dangerous that maintaining ignorance required eternal torture as deterrent? And why did the system need mortals to never, ever discover what the gods actually knew? Maybe the answer lies not in what the gods knew, but in what they were preventing humans from becoming. Consider the pattern. Every myth involving forbidden knowledge ends the same way. The mortal gains something. Understanding, skill, access, and immediately becomes a threat. Not to the gods' power, to the system itself. Prometheus gave fire, humanity built civilization. Asclepius learned healing. He brought people back from death. Orpheus mastered music so perfectly he could manipulate the fabric of reality itself, bending nature to his will through sound alone. These weren't crimes against divine ego. They were breaches of a fundamental barrier that was supposed to remain impenetrable. What if the gods weren't gods at all? What if they were administrators of a system designed to keep humanity at a specific level of capability, forever? The myths tell us the gods created humans, but they never explain why. They never justify the purpose. Humans exist to worship, to sacrifice, to entertain the divine through their struggles. That's the story we inherited. But it's a story told by the very system that benefits from our limitations. Look at what happens when humans approach divine knowledge in these myths. They don't just anger the gods, they threaten cosmic order itself. The universe responds with punishment so severe it becomes eternal warning. Arachne weaves better than Athena. She's transformed into a spider, forced to weave forever but never create art again. Her skill isn't destroyed, it's trapped in an inferior form, made useless for anything beyond survival. That's not revenge, that's containment. Bellerophon rides Pegasus, defeats monsters, becomes a hero of impossible stature. Then he tries to fly to Olympus itself. Zeus sends a gadfly to sting Pegasus. Bellerophon falls. He doesn't die. He survives crippled and blind, wandering the earth alone until natural death finally takes him decades later. He's not killed for his ambition. He's left alive as a monument to failure, a living reminder that approaching the divine leads only to ruin. The pattern repeats obsessively. Reach beyond your station, gain power that approaches the divine, and you'll be transformed into a warning. Your punishment will be visible, permanent, and perfectly calibrated to demonstrate why no one else should try. But here's where it gets strange. The gods themselves seem bound by these rules. When Prometheus defies Zeus, Zeus can't simply kill him. He has to follow protocol, chain him, send the eagle, make the punishment eternal and public, as if Zeus himself is operating within constraints, following a script he didn't write. When the Titans are defeated, they're not destroyed, they're imprisoned in Tartarus. Locked away but not eliminated. Why? If the Olympians have absolute power, why preserve their enemies? Unless the Olympians don't have absolute power, unless they're administrators, not architects, running a system they didn't create and can't fundamentally alter. The oldest myths, the ones that predate classical Greece, hint at something before the gods. Chaos, the primordial void, forces without personality or intention, then suddenly structure, order, gods with roles and rules and carefully maintained hierarchies. What if that transition wasn't natural? What if the gods themselves are relatively recent, installed to manage something far older? The mystery religions knew something. That much is clear. They taught initiates about cycles, about death and rebirth, about the soul's journey through multiple forms. But they also taught something else, something that made the knowledge worth protecting with death oaths that held for over a millennium. Plato, who was likely initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, wrote about the world of forms, a higher reality of perfect patterns that our physical world merely imitates. He described our existence as shadows on a cave wall, projections of something more real that we can't directly perceive. He also wrote that learning isn't acquiring new knowledge. It's remembering what the soul knew before birth, before it was imprisoned in flesh. That word, imprisoned. What if mortality isn't a natural condition? What if it's an imposed limitation? A system designed to ensure humans forget what they knew before, preventing them from accumulating knowledge across lifetimes, keeping them perpetually ignorant by forcing them to start over with each generation. The gods are immortal. They remember everything. They build on knowledge across ages. Humans die. Their understanding dies with them. Every generation must relearn, rediscover, rebuild from fragments. That's not a gift of finite life-making existence, precious. That's an intentional handicap ensuring we never catch up. And when someone like Asclepius learns to reverse death, to break the cycle, the response is immediate and absolute. Kill him, make it permanent, because if humans stop dying, they stop forgetting. And if they stop forgetting, they eventually remember what they were before the system was installed. The myths aren't warnings from benevolent gods protecting us from dangerous knowledge. They're threats from administrators desperately trying to prevent humans from discovering what they actually are. We're not meant to stay mortal. We're kept mortal. And every story about forbidden knowledge is really a story about someone who almost remembered how to break free. The question isn't what the gods know that we don't. It's what we knew that the gods made us forget and why they need us to stay forgotten.